and welcome to Andy Dennert's Reality Blurred. I'm the aforementioned Andy, the creator of Reality Blurred, and a writer who believes in the power of true stories. Every week I'll take you behind the scenes of reality TV and my writing. On today's show, 2 Survivor legends and 2 conversations for you to eavesdrop on, plus recommendations for free and entertaining streaming TV, and stick around to the end for life advice from TV, this time from a Nobel laureate. Welcome, and thank you so much for giving me space in your podcast app or phone or car radio or whatever device you're listening on. I so appreciate that. Today I'm introducing a new segment, Great Tape, where I share audio of my interviews with reality TV cast and producers. For the Great Tape today, we are going to hear from 2 different Survivor players. One, perhaps one of the greatest, or not perhaps, one of the greatest Survivor players of all time, Sandra Diaz-Twine, who won Survivor twice. And that is something that probably no one else will ever do because, of course, Tony won Survivor twice as well, but he won on an all-winners season. My guess is we will never see another winner win a second season of Survivor unless, I guess, no one knows their winner, which could happen on Survivor 50. I guess we'll see that this season because Savannah from season 49 is on, and who knows, maybe she goes all the way. The second interview is with Stephen Fishback, who has a novel out today. More from him or more about that interview in just a moment, but let me introduce Sandra's first, and I'll give you a little bit of the segment I like to call Behind the Vlog here too, where I discuss the blogging magic. Both of these interviews have been published on Reality Blurred. You can basically read transcripts of each of them. Sometimes I do interviews in transcript form. Sometimes I just kind of pull quotes out and integrate them into a larger story. In this case, both of them are transcripts because they read, I think, well as conversations, and it's nice to hear the person fully in their own voice. At the same time, you will hear that these are 2 very different types of interviews. So I talked to Sandra last week before the first episode of the new Fox show Extracted came out, or it's not new, second season, but brand new season of Extracted, and Sandra is on it with her daughter Nina, who she also competed on Australian Survivor with, and also Nina's boyfriend. Extracted is a survival show where basically there is one person out by themselves, kind of like alone on history, and the other 2 players, their friends, loved ones, family members, are back in a headquarters watching them all the time and competing in strategic games to send them supplies and otherwise help them out. They're also the only ones who can actually pull their loved one out of the game by pressing a big red extract button, hence the show's name. So Sandra is one of the players on this season, and I was really interested in talking to her about coming back to reality TV in this game. She's not gone away from reality TV. She just did a game show on Fox. She did The Traitors. Obviously, she's been on Survivor several times as a player and in other contexts. What's interesting, I think, about this interview is that because we're not talking about too many specifics, like I talked to her and ran this interview before the show aired, I didn't want to spoil anything that I'd seen in those first few episodes, even though I had a chance to preview them to prepare for this interview. At the same time, that also means I couldn't really get into specifics with her. And I think you can kind of hear that in this. It's more of a sort of back and forth versus a conversation. It's not something we're kind of like just really sinking our teeth into, but it's more of a traditional journalistic interview. So I think it was really interesting, the things we talked about. Here you will hear 2 separate clips from Sandra, separated by a little whoosh. So there's an edit mark there for you to know what's going on. But enjoy hearing my conversation with Sandra.
I was contacted for that, for 99 to Beat, and then I was contacted for Extracted. And pretty much they just simply said they were looking for a 2-female team with a guy in the woods because they didn't have that the first season. So that was it. That was the story, and that was all she wrote. There wasn't a lot of time, so it was more like, are you interested? And then you need to get these things done, and then next thing you know, I was out there.
Gotcha. So it sounds like from a casting perspective, there wasn't a question about who would be in the woods, but did you have any desire to be in that role to show everyone that you could do this yet again in your life, or
Ideally, I wouldn't have wanted to go in the woods. I think I'm beyond that point, and when you listen to a lot of the survivors, the Mount Rushmore survivors, they're like, "We're done suffering, starving, freezing, being miserable." Um, and with Nina, but I knew from the jump that it was a two-female team with a guy in the woods,
Right.
because that's exactly what they needed that they didn't have the first season. So, really, it never crossed my mind, and it was more like, well, they already knew my daughter as well. So it was more like who would be the guy, and I think they thought it might have been potentially my husband, but he's retired. He has no interest in reality TV. So then it became just Eric, and after talking to Eric, they loved him.
One of the things that made me laugh in that very first episode is just you talking about how when you were on Survivor, Eric would talk to you about like, oh, I would have done this or done that, and sort of Monday morning quarterback your decisions. And so I guess like, did you really feel like this is like a good chance for him to experience what you experienced so much and get a little flavor of that?
Absolutely, not only me, my daughter, because she did 2 Australian Survivors, and he always had something to say. I mean, they were watching the football game last night, and you would have thought that he knows everything there is to know about football. He's not a football player, you know what I'm saying? Like, when people watch from the couch, they're always like, "I would have done this," or "They did that wrong, and I would," it's always what they would have done, and then you're like, "Okay, put your money where your mouth is. You go out there and you figure it out."
Did you I mean, that aside, did you talk to him about sort of like or did Nina like, "Here's what worked for us on Australian Survivor," or, "Here are some tips that we have." Like, did you kind of help him prepare for based on, that experience that you've had so many times?
No, no, because we didn't have a lot of time, and they really spoke to him and asked him how many times he had gone camping, and he said, "1 time for 2 days." And it was like music to their ears, and so they said, "How will you prepare?" Because we only had, I think, about a 3-week turnaround.
Hmm.
They said, "What will you do to prepare?" And he was like, "Watch YouTube." So even better for them. He did watch the first season of Extracted here at home and also before the game started while we were in sequester, but that was it. They really don't want anyone that really knows, I feel, what they're doing, because then they have a upper hand.
Right.
Uh, and you're always gonna find those people that have no idea but are willing to go out there, suffer, and see if they have it.
In terms of your preparation, like, you're coming into a game that is not brand new, so you have this first season to watch. Does that first season help you at all, like, decide on strategy or think about how you're going to approach it from the HQ angle?
Absolutely. So what we did, me and Nina both, we rewatched it, I think, a total of 3 times.
Wow.
And also, I went back to try to find any interviews that the players, had participated in, or any podcast, anything that would give us more information about everything, even the location, then to find out we were in a totally brand new location, so that didn't help, but we kinda get the gist of everything. I simply said, "We just gotta do our best anytime it's go time, and we're not really gonna suffer because we're gonna be, there's gonna be catering, we just gotta sit there and watch the monitors." Um, so I think we were pretty much prepared, our way. And me and my daughter play totally different. She's not the kind of person where let's do this, let's do that. That's not how she is. I have to just let her play her own game. So as far as we were concerned, we were good and we were ready to go into HQ. The only thing I was hesitant about was anyone knowing who I was. And there's always one person. There's always one. And seeing what happens. And that happened.
Well, it feels like for you now, I mean, after winning Survivor twice, it like, you now have this, this reputation in reality TV history that will never be duplicated and also just, really establishes you as an incredible player. So it feels like that you will always come into almost every game with that. Does that have to affect the way that you prepare other than hoping maybe no one recognizes you? But do you come into it, yeah, differently knowing like, yeah, I have this not necessarily target, but knowledge?
I come in humble because I know someone gonna, snitch on me right away. And when people hear she's a two-time winner or whatever it may be, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes like she's won Survivor once. I don't correct them, you know? But I just have to be careful, and I have to be more of like an open door policy, very friendly. Like I have to really go over the top and be super friendly, I feel, so that I can be approachable and maybe get the information that I want or have people on my side versus being afraid of me. I want them to want to play with me.
Okay, so next up is my conversation slash interview with Stephen Fishback about his novel and about his time on Survivor. Like I said, I think this one is a little different. It's more conversational. I think part of that also is that I've known Stephen for 15 plus years now, and we actually start talking about meeting in Brazil for Survivor token genes here. I also thought it was really interesting because we kind of got into obviously his writing of this new novel and also kind of some of the ways that that compares to his reality TV experience. One reason I wanted to share both of these interviews in this context is I think it's hopefully fun to listen to them, and I've picked segments that I think are at least a little more entertaining than others. You'll notice on Reality Blurred for this interview and all the interviews I do in transcript form, a little disclaimer at the top that says this interview has been condensed and edited to clean up human speech. I think you will, if you want to like sit down and kind of go through both of these clips, Sandra and Stephen, and compare them to what's on the site. That would be a maybe fascinating exercise, or perhaps you're a teacher in journalism and or writing or editing. That might be a fun exercise, or you can just roll your eyes at me right now and just listen to this, and that'll be the end of it. But when I'm including written transcripts, I am transcribing them, or I am now letting a program transcribe them for me. And then I am going through and editing that. So I'm condensing it in the sense that maybe I remove a question and an answer that just kind of went to a place that didn't really help or feel like it really fit with the story. Maybe it sort of felt like we were just covering the same ground twice. I am always, when I'm doing these cuts, making sure that I don't change the meaning of the sentence or the paragraph or whatever I'm cutting from. I'm always trying to ensure that I keep everything intact. And the same thing is true for the cleaning up human speech part. So what that means is that I'm removing things like likes and ums and false starts. And I'm also inserting punctuation like em dashes or commas or semicolons, periods, new paragraphs, just to make human speech readable. I am talking to you now without a script. And so if you were to transcribe what I'm saying right now, please don't do that. I don't know why anyone would do that. But you would see that I am not speaking in complete sentences. I am probably rambling at some points and at other points, using some filler words like, well, so, okay, that kind of thing. And so when I'm condensing, I just remove all of that. Occasionally, I'll keep one in when I think it's important to the context. Like if it shows someone hesitating or trying to think of something or kind of demonstrating a point in a way that that word, the word like, for example, is critical, I will leave it in. So I'm, again, trying not to change the meaning. I am sure that two people taking the same exact transcript would edit and condense it in different ways. That's part of the selection process that happens in journalism. And I find that really interesting, but also something I think we don't talk about that much. So it's here's the uncondensed, unedited version. Although in truth, this is condensed because I have just included a few minutes of our conversation, whereas we talked for more than 30. So I am definitely still editing here, just like a reality TV producer or a writer or a novelist. So here is a chunk of my conversation with Stephen. I guess maybe that's the best place to start is back when we met in Tocantins, only because when I was rereading that interview that we did, I was so struck by how aware you were of all kinds of parts of the process in a way that other people weren't, or at least didn't discuss openly with me, I guess. Like we talked about everything from like your anxiety about how other people were perceiving you, which obviously has become a huge thing for Survivor 49 all of a sudden, and just like um, people's perception of image and contracts and all the stuff that like obviously is in the book, but obviously was your life too. So yeah, it's a feels like a full circle kind of moment.
Well, the real highlight of that interview was I believe you selected me as your preseason, your preseason pick for the show. So first of all, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but second of all, it was a great honor I got close. I really got close. We didn't do any like ball challenges in our interview, and I think that might have given you some like key insight into whether I was going to how I was going to perform at the end. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think too much that way. I think that's like probably my downfall is being too aware of all of those like little details and like therefore playing to them. And honestly, like in this book, that was one of the things I was trying to capture with Kent is he's like so hyper aware of production. He almost like he creates this whole narrative for himself about what's happening. That's not even necessarily happening, right? Like he's like reading subtext and cues into everything and then like driving himself crazy trying to fulfill it.
So I know, to jump into these characters, I know that they are not one to one you. Obviously, that's it's they're fictional creations. You do mention that you see yourself a little in Miriam and the kind of nerdiness of it all. But I guess like, would you say that Kent is more like Tolkien Stephen, or like is that more later Stephen because you had a little more awareness of the process?
I think one thing I saw when I went back, like when you first walk onto one of these shows, you know, there's so much going on around you, you can't process it all. There's, camera people running and, boats going and, a drone in the sky. And I think that kind of contributes to the purity of the first contestants, of the first time you're a contestant, where you go in and like you really are immersed in the experience. All that stuff is ancillary to your awareness because you can't focus on it. And then when when you come off the show, suddenly you realize like, oh, like that was the real experience. Like I was playing a game and that was cool. But the real thing that was happening was I was part of a TV show and that's what the culture is digesting and that's what people are remembering and that's what everybody's seeing. So, when you go back, and this is what I was trying to capture with Kent, suddenly you do see it all. You are aware of all of the producers running around, of the cameras, of like what the expression on your face is, and how it's going to be like, relayed to 4 million people around the country. And it's like a crippling kind of awareness. It's like too much, and that, so I definitely think, Miriam is more that sort of naivete, that hope for this huge transformational experience from a first time contestant. And Kent, he was not me. When I first wrote Kent, I was like 35 and I was like, oh, 44. This guy is impossibly old. Now I'm 46. So he's like a young buck to me now. But he has that sort of awareness of the returning player.
So I guess let's back up because I jumped right into the middle of the book essentially, and to look back in like where this came from. Obviously, you wrote this short story, Two Sharks, which had Kent as a main character, but like when did you start working on that? And like because you mentioned in the introduction that the seeds of this even came while you were being filmed for Survivor. So I'm curious, like how far back can you actually trace it, or when did this story begin?
Oh, sorry. I my it's funny, like I wrote a book from a producer's perspective, like a whole novel from Beck's perspective, basically. And because for a couple of reasons. First of all, like I was really interested in that, because I'm not a producer. And I saw all these producers and what the work they were doing was so interesting. And I just wanted to put myself in their head and like kind of like see how they think, because it's such an interesting job where you are trying to tell a structured 3-act story using real people in the most chaotic environment, the jungle, that you possibly can. And like, what a fascinating project. And, they're really like, they're amazing storytellers. But when I wrote it, I felt like it wasn't good enough. I felt like I could do better. So I basically, I went back, I got my MFA through NYU. And while I was there, just to kind of try stuff out, I wrote this story, Two Sharks, about a has-been reality contestant at a reality TV charity event. A world we have both, seen in all of its ridiculousness. And I thought, what a absurd world. Like, wouldn't like what a fun setting. And when I wrote that piece, I really felt like I was capturing the thing that I could add, like I have that contestant's perspective. I have seen this like insane world of post-show reality contestants. And a teacher of mine, John Freeman, said like this belongs in the novel. And when I kind of like merged these two things, which was like this Kent story with this Beck narrative, like, suddenly it all just like came together. It was like the chaos and awareness of Kent with this kind of like very structured reality show story of Beck.
Mm, interesting. Was the original, the sort of Beck version, the same show, or did you like kind of rethink it once you decided that Ken needed to be put into it?
It was basically the same show. And honestly, like what Kent just did, like there was a character who was sort of Kent, but he wasn't like alive, you know, he was kind of just sort of this like cipher. And that was the problem, was that because it was all from Beck's point of view, and she really sees these characters as kind of archetypes that she's moving around, it was so hard to present what I think is like the real heart of the book, which is that sort of tension between them being an archetype and them being a messy human, and then kind of like that sort of disconnect. And then so like just like adding that awareness from Kent's perspective, suddenly like the texture came to life.
That's really cool. I just have to thank you for finally writing some fiction about reality TV that is not insufferable to read, because
That's why I'm going to put that on the but not insufferable to read. That's going to go on the jack.
exactly. Actually, well, that I will say it in an even better way, which is like it's a really pleasurable read while also being like, you dive into some like not just the emotionality and the interiority of the characters, but like get into some of the sticky ethical stuff that I'm interested in, obviously. Without that, like that doesn't stop the narrative in its tracks. It also doesn't feel like you are like so many of these books, and I've, not read them in completion, but like when I've dipped into them, they're just like they feel like someone watched a reality show once and are convinced they know how they're made, and it's just awful. So obviously you're bringing some perspective to this, but I guess like any hesitation to like write about it in the sense that because you were inside it, because you knew it so well that like either people are going to be trying to map you onto the characters or say like that's me, the producer, you're talking about me kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're nailing it. I mean, first of all, both that was my goal, right? Was like to kind of like capture some of the moral, gray areas and questionable questionable aspects of this industry that we all kind of just, that we all sort of like just accept or like ignore because we want our like fun cheesy TV, on prime time. And so, but at the same time, to have like a plot that was fun and moving and moved quickly. So if you just wanted that kind of like quick moving reality show, I wanted to provide that for you while also sort of like giving this sort of the sort of messier aspects. But yes, like I mean, that was my big fear, was that people would think that it was some tell all about Survivor, and that's why I have the author's note. I didn't want it to be that because first of all, I didn't just want it to be like, I feel like then I'm just like the Survivor guy who wrote a Survivor book. And I wanted to be saying something about this whole industry and this whole world that is a really big part of our world now. It's obviously like been elevated into the world of politics. It sort of has come to define a lot of our current culture. And I wanted to kind of go back to the heart of it, which is these shows, and sort of like just like wrestle with the moral and ethical dilemmas within them. But yeah, I really didn't want anybody to be like, this is about me. Like this is, and so like really steered clear of that. That's why, Escape is not Survivor. It's a very different show. There's no vote outs. It's like structurally very different.
I hope you enjoyed both of those and the accompanying commentary. So let's go on now to recommendations, where I share things that are bringing joy and entertainment into my life. I want to mention that right now, Pluto TV is in the middle of streaming Survivor from season 1 all the way through season 49 in a row. I love reality TV marathons. That's how I discovered The Real World in the first place. Back in the 1990s, I stumbled across a marathon of The Real World Los Angeles one Saturday. And, I still appreciate just kind of being able to fall into something new and see it. I guess marathons have kind of become what we do now with binge watching. We're just creating them ourselves, like just finding a show and then watching it all the way through. It's kind of fun that Pluto has this Survivor marathon leading into season 50. And that brings me to my second recommendation, which is Pluto TV and other free streaming services. Technically, these are called FAST channels, which stands for free ad supported streaming, free ads, FAST, free ad supported TV. Okay, I've completely forgotten the acronym now. Anyway, they are basically what cable used to look like for a lot of us in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. A bunch of channels, and you pick from them and watch whatever's on because it's just live TV. Pluto, like the other two that I'll recommend, which are Tubi, Tubi, and the Roku channel. The Roku channel is actually a free streaming service that has nothing to do with the device, or actually same company, it just doesn't require the device. So you can go download the Roku channel app to your TV right now, even if you don't have a Roku device or TV or whatever. It's great. There's a lot of really great content there. So what you'll find on these, again, are these channels, some of which are like, maybe it's like 1980s game shows, and there'll be a different one every half an hour and kind of roll right through those. And other times they'll have channels that are just one show repeating. So for example, Pluto has a Survivor channel that has typically rotated through 2, 3, maybe 4 seasons, just kind of showing the whole season, then repeating and going back to the next one. Right now, it's obviously doing this 49 season in a row marathon. But they also have on-demand content, so you can watch movies, TV shows. Pluto, for example, has every single season of Survivor 1 through 49 for you to watch for free. So if you've been paying for Paramount Plus to watch that, you don't have to do that. Or if you not wanted to pay for Paramount Plus and you want to watch Survivor for free, it's now available on Pluto TV, at least for right now. So check out Pluto TV and these other free streaming services, Tubi, the Roku channel. Just a lot of great content, sometimes original content. Like the Roku channel has The Great American Baking Show, which has Paul Hollywood and Prue Leith and American contestants. So it's basically Great British Bake Off, just American version and specials. So there's some original stuff too, but then just a lot of classics. Like the Roku channel has the Great Pottery Throwdown, which I love and have recommended to y'all before. So just great things to have if on your smart TV, on your laptop, whatever. Great sources of entertainment at absolutely no cost. Okay, that's everything for today. Thanks so much for listening. Feel free to send me your feedback, questions, and thoughts. Our theme song is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod, and this episode is by me, Andy Dennert, and is copyright 2026 by Reality Blurred LLC, which is also me. You can find me at realityblurred.com and andydennert.com. I'll leave you today with life advice from TV, this time in a clip from a new documentary, Elie Wiesel, Soul on Fire, which is part of American Masters on PBS. It's actually premiering tonight, January 27th, 2026, but you'll be able to stream it and possibly find it in repeats and original broadcasts on your own PBS station. This clip comes from the trailer, and I think these words are even more resonant today with what's going on in the United States as I say these words.
What have I learned in the last 40 years? I learned the perils of language and those of silence. But I have also learned that suffering confers no privileges. This is why survivors have tried to teach their contemporaries how to invent hope in a world that offers none.
Why I write? What else could I do? I write to bear witness